Namo Namaha. So today we are going to see how Upanishads told their philosophy, propounded their philosophy through stories, katha. I'm going to use the word katha because it has a special meaning too. But before we go into that, let me tell you only a couple of sentences about what is Upanishad. Upanishad is to sit near and at a lower level to Guru. The Guru will tell you the philosophy, the knowledge, and the students, the Shishyas will all listen to it. The same way, I mean, there would be a platform built around a tree. If you remember, Rabindranath Tagore also picked up this, and in Shantiniketan, he used the same method of imparting knowledge. So, this Upanishad, I mean, every time we read any Upanishad, the 10 principal Upanishads, we take help of Adi Shankaracharya's Bhashya. Like in Jnaneshwar says that Bhashyakara te vata pusatu. Similarly, even we have to take help from Adi Shankaracharya, and he explains this in his commentary, in his Bhashya. Why did Upanishads come into being? See, after the Rig Veda, yes, we have seen what Rig Veda is, right? And after the Rig Veda, I told you that the entire ninth mandala is only about yajna, especially Soma yajna. Yajurveda is only about what an advaryu should do in a yajna. Samaveda is only about the samans that are to be sung in a Soma yajna. So everything was, I mean, the pivot of the culture was yajna. If you want anything, Swarga Kamo Jyotishtomena Yajeta. If you want Swarga after death, then what you should do is perform a Jyotishtoma. If you want rain, then you perform Kariri Ishti. If you want a son, remember in Ramayana, Dasharatha performed this Putra Kama Ishti. Right? So there were so many yajnas for each and everything. The solution given was yajna. And sometimes what happens is the means to reach at that end itself becomes an end. Right? So yajna itself became more important. And therefore, there was too much of yajna. People got kind of, they were not happy with this situation. And they said, does yajna really give all this? Are you sure you get swarga after death when you perform Jyotishtoma? Who knows? And these people, while they were doing only karma kanda, that is rites and rituals, in this Yajurveda, Samhita, Samaveda, and even other literature, in Upanishads, and before that in Aranyaka, they started thinking of yajna, but not from the karma kanda view, but from the jnana kanda aspect. So they started thinking about what is the real meaning of yajna? Why do we perform yajna? What is the ultimate goal of doing a particular rite? Okay, and while they were taking into consideration all this, they realized that there is so much knowledge apart from yajna. There is so much knowledge which is what we call metaphysical. Meta is beyond, and physical is material, of course. So, all this metaphysical knowledge, which we also call spiritual knowledge, we also call it adhyatma, all these things came into Upanishads. So, for Upanishads, adhyatma or spiritual knowledge is the main theme, right? In fact, the word Upanishad is used in some Upanishadic texts themselves as Rahasyamay Jnana, which in English is translated as esoteric knowledge. But remember, that when we come to Upanishads, there is this great transition from rituals to spirituals. Okay? And with this in our mind, we are looking at the Upanishads. There are many Upanishads, but we are going to look into only 10 principal Upanishads, and they are called 10 Mukhyopanishad for the simplest reason that Shankaracharya wrote a bhashya on these 10. Ishakena, Kataprashna, Mundaka, etc. We won't go into the details. And whichever Veda the Upanishad belongs to, the philosophy propounded in it is universal. It is not so that suppose a Rigvedic Upanishad, Aitareya Upanishad, tells you something about Atman. Doesn't mean this applies only to Rigvedic people. No, it applies to everybody, and therefore Upanishads tell you universal knowledge. Okay? Now, when I said Katha, what did I mean? First of all, we know the meaning of the word Katha. Katha is a story, and you will be surprised that storytelling is such a popular way of imparting knowledge, especially in Indian tradition. Everywhere in the world, but especially in the Indian tradition, storytelling has great value. And how do we do that? See, I told you that even in the Rig Veda, there are stories Pururava Urvashi, Yama Yami, Saramapani, Vasishtha Vishwamitra. There are so many stories, through which they tell you something. And when you tell a story, when you tell a katha, what happens is you get attracted to it. If I start telling you that there is an Atman in me and there is Atman in you and then there is a Brahman in the ultimate reality is the Brahman, then nobody wants to pay attention. It becomes prosaic, it becomes dry, and it becomes very uninteresting. So, telling the philosophy through katha is a very important thing. Actually, if you remember, I mean, you will remember, even Gita. Gita doesn't start by just imparting knowledge. Then they give you the background that how Arjuna came there and then everybody blew the conches and then he said, "Oh my God, I can't fight with my relatives." And then Krishna started talking to him. So every time, whenever there is a story context, we are attracted to that. And when you tell stories, the style is simple. How do you tell stories? I mean, you can't make long compound words, you can't make very long sentences, you can't use difficult words, and therefore, the style, as it is known in Sanskrit poetics, is called, it is full of prasada. Prasada is easiness. So it's easy, to know that philosophy, and since it is stories, you start telling about it. Shankaracharya at one place gives another explanation of the word katha. He says, Katha nama vicharana. Purva paksha pratipaksha bhavena vicharana. What is vicharana? Asking questions. So this is a discussion. This is not argument. So katha can also be a discussion. And purva paksha pratipaksha. One person says this, other person says that. I mean, we know how debating happens. And so katha can also mean that. But I'm using the word katha in the sense of akhyayika. Shankaracharya himself tells you that akhyayika tu sukhavabodhartha. Sukha avabodha artha. When you tell akhyayika, narratives, stories, then they become very easy to understand. Sukha avabodha. And therefore, katha, whether you call them katha or akhyayika, they become an important medium in Upanishads to propound the philosophy. Now, what we are going to do is, I'll tell you some of the stories, and you will not even know when and how you moved from the storyline to the philosophy. Okay, this happens all the time. Even before Upanishads, there are texts called Brahmana Grantha. This word Brahmana has absolutely nothing to do with the caste. It is neuter in gender and it deals with only Yajna and Brahman. Brahman is a Vedic mantra in this particular context. There, they have such wonderful stories, but they are all narrated in the context of a particular yajna. Okay, for example, in Rajasuya, they tell you the story of Shunashepa. It's such a beautiful story that later on a great playwright called Bhasa was tempted to write a Madhyama Vyayoga, a small one-act play on this Shunashepa Katha. But for the authors, for the composers of the text, that doesn't matter. The story doesn't matter. From there, they take you to the ritual context. That is important. Similarly, in Upanishads, they take you from the story to spiritual context. Okay, first, I will tell you the story of Kathopanishad because many of us have read that and many of us know that also a little bit. There is a lot of similarity between Kathopanishad and Gita. So there is this young boy. Remember one thing in Upanishads, it is men who preach philosophy, women preach philosophy, kings, Vaishyas, Shudras, even small children like Satyakama Jabala or Nachiketa, they also talk about philosophy. So this Nachiketa, his father performed a yajna. Okay. And in that yajna, he gave away everything that he had to the Brahmanas, the priests, as dakshina. Now, this is what the Kathopanishad tells you. So you are looking, you imagine, oh, there is a yajna and he gave away everything he had to the priests and now he has nothing left. And this child, who is only 8 years old, Ashtavarshiya, and he goes to the father and he keeps on interfering between everything and he says, Father, now even I will be given away to someone. The father ultimately got so annoyed, he said, yes, I'm going to give you to death. Now this is a, we don't take it literally. Even today, especially in the coastal area, a grandmother might call her grandchildren very lovingly as Are Meliano, right? Does not mean she wants them to die. Similarly, his father did not want him to die or any such thing, but Nachiketa took it to his heart. He said, my father wants to give me to death, so why don't I go? And he goes there to death, that is Yama. But Yama is not in his house, and so Nachiketa stays there for 2 days and 3 nights. When Yama comes back, he says, oh, such a resplendent and bright Brahmana Batu has been sitting at my doorstep for 3 nights. So, okay, I'll grant you three blessings. So he said, ask for something. Now, see, he is a young child. So, the first thing he asks is, when I go back, please see to it that my father doesn't get angry with me. Such a sweet thing. Then, second blessing, he says, I have seen my father perform yajnas, and there were various agnis. I wouldn't use the word fire, there were various agnis. Dakshina Agni, Garapatya, Avaniya, this, that. And what all does this mean? So yeah, Yama says, you're too young for that. He says, no, no, I want to learn. I have jnana, so please tell me. So Yama tells him. And he says that since you have understood what all I have taught you, I will see to it that from today onwards, those who perform yajna will enkindle one more fire, which will be called Nachiketa Agni after you. Okay, so that was a great reward to Nachiketa. Okay, so first emotional level, my father should get angry, then ritual level, and now the third level. He says, "Oh Yama, I want to know what happens to a human being after death." This is a big science. It is called eschatology, and Nachiketa, 8 years old, wants to know this, and he wants to know it straight from the horse's mouth, straight from Yama himself. Yama is quite stunned, He said, "Oh, you are too young. You are only 8 years old. You don't have to know this at this stage. Why don't you ask something like, I can give you maybe gold chains, I can give you cows, I can give you money and this and that." Nachiketa says, "No, I don't want anything, and I want to know what happens to a human after his death." And then Yama tells him all that. We won't go into all the details, but did you realize how Kathopanishad, through the story of Nachiketa, tells you the philosophy of Nachiketa Agni and also Mrityuttara Jivana, if there is anything, if you believe that. So, Mrityuttara Avastha, whatever you call it. So, what happens is the story sticks to you. You never forget the story, and therefore you never forget the philosophy either. And that is why storytelling becomes very important. There are stories everywhere, but some of them are small, but some of them are nice also. I'll tell you a story about, I think it's from Chandogya Upanishad. And there is, Chandogya Upanishad tells you that suppose there is this man who comes from Gandhara Desha, Kandahar, Afghanistan, modern day Afghanistan. So he is brought from Gandhara Desha by thieves. His hands are tied, and they have put an eye band on him so that he cannot see anything. They rob him, and then they let him go to the jungle, and he is completely helpless. So you see, you are now again imagining this man whose hands and feet are tied and who cannot see anything and all. And the Upanishad asks you, so do you think he can go to his house, his home, safely with in such a condition? Of course he can't. So what happens is some kind person comes, loosens his ropes, takes away the eye band, and then Sir Gandhara, that man from Gandhara Desha, Medhavi Bhutva, Pandito Bhutva, he becomes Pandita, he becomes Medhavi. That is, he starts knowing everything. He has understood everything, where he is, which direction to take, and all that, and then he goes home. Now, what does this story tell you? This story doesn't tell you that there was this man who was robbed and all. That is not important. What it tells you is that everybody, all of us, have a kind of eye band on our eyes. We refuse to see the truth. Sometimes this eye band is about ignorance. Sometimes it is about ego. Sometimes it is about laziness. Sometimes it is about, oh, I just don't like that. Okay, whatever, dislike. So, if you take away that eye band, you will see the truth clearly, and therefore this story becomes important. For me, this is important also because of one more reason, that just like Gandhari from Mahabharata, She was also from Gandhara, and she also had a eye band later on. We know the reasons, but somehow this Gandhara person and the eye band, you will be surprised, it found not only in Mahabharata and Chandogya, but it is also mentioned in one of the stotras ascribed to Shankaracharya. Tattvavabodha or something, where the same thing happens, that robbers come and all that. But I'm quite amused, to see that there is this connection between Iban and a person from Gandhara. Then there is another story. Prashnopanishad tells you that there is one guru, Paipalada, and there are six students. And he says, do you have any difficulty? And they ask him questions. And then the questions are answered, of course, and he tells them the philosophy. Many such stories, and they are abandoned. But sometimes the stories are so beautiful that they, I should be saying it, but they become more meaningful than even the philosophy at times. I'll tell you the story of, again from Chandogya, Raikva, Samvarga Vidya. Now listen to the story and see how it tells you a lot about philosophy and the social conditions of those times. Both are important. So there is this great king called Janashruti Pautrayana, very generous, a great philosopher, intelligent man. Once he was sitting on his, let's say, balcony, and two hamsas, swans, they flew by. By the way, Janashruti knew the language of birds and animals. Hamsa is a metaphor used in Indian philosophy for soul, 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 right? And that is why we have words like Paramahamsa. So, two Hamsas were going, and one of them says, Ai Bhallaksha, Bhallaksha, oh Bhallaksha, see this king, Janashruti Pautrayana, he is very generous, he is very intelligent. He knows a lot of philosophy. The other Hamsa says, oh, I don't believe so. He is not as great as Raikva. That's all Janashruti Pautrayana hears. Then he says, Janashruti Pautrayana says, next morning, Janashruti Pautrayana gets up and orders all his staff that go in all directions and find out a person, a great philosopher named Raikva. They go everywhere, like in the Pathashala, in Vidyapitha and Gurukulas and all, because that is where you will typically find a philosopher. No one finds anything. Then one of his soldiers finds a person under a bullock cart. He is wearing torn clothes. He has not had a bath. He has some skin disease which he is scratching all the time. And he is Shudra, and he says, my name is Raiko. So the soldier comes, goes to the king and says, in such and such place there is this person Raiko. But I doubt whether he is a philosopher. It doesn't look like one. Janashruti goes there next day with lots of fruits and some money and all that. And he says, I have heard the Hausa saying that you know what is called Samvarga Vidya. So please teach me. Raiko just waves his hand and says, no, I can't. So next day king comes again. He thinks that maybe that money was not enough for him. He's such a poor fellow. So I will give him something more. He brings cows and clothes and this and that and says, at least now you teach me. Raikwa says no. See, socially also this story becomes more and more important gradually. Third day, the king says, okay, I am a king of this area. Actually, I am a Kshatriya, you are a Shudra, but I have come to you in search of knowledge, right? So I will give you half my kingdom, and this place where you are sitting will be called Raikva Parana after you. He says, no, you can give me the entire kingdom. I am not going to teach you Samvarga Vidya. The king is wondering where he is going wrong. Last day, the king brings his beautiful young daughter and says, okay, I will marry my daughter to you. Raikwa says, yes. When you have this, what we call roti beti vyavahar, then you are on the same level. And then this shows that Jana Shruti Pautrayana, in spite of being a king, in spite of being a kshatriya, in spite of being a rich person, just because he was interested in jnana, in tattva jnana, has come down to Raikwa's level and has offered his daughter. Then, of course, Raikwa tells him the Samvarga Vidya, which is very simple. Samvarga is that which covers. He says, Vayur Vava Samvarga. Everything is contained in Vayu. We know that there is air everywhere. This Vayu, outside, it is Adhibhautika, it is air. Adhidaivika, it is Vayu Devata. And in our body, it is Vayu is called Prana, right? That is Samvarga Vidya. So, why is this important, this story? Because, see, like I said, the philosophy is important, but the story tells you so much about those social conditions of those times that the kings were not ashamed to go down or stoop down to the level of a Shudra and get knowledge for them. Right? So there are many such stories. Again, in Chandogya, there is one more story of Uddalaka Aruni and his son Shvetaketu. That's a beautiful story. Uddalaka Aruni himself is a great teacher, but he knows that his son will never learn from him. No son wants to learn from his father, even though the father is the greatest teacher in the world, they want to go somewhere else. So he goes to some Gurukula, comes back. And when he comes back, there is kind of intellectual arrogance. You could see that Shvetaketu, is thinking too much of himself. And then he comes and tells his father, oh, I learned this, I learned that, I learned this, I recited this particular pada, whatever. Uddalakarudi says, okay, I can see that you learned so many things, which is wonderful. But tell me one thing. Did you learn about one principle where you know that principle and then the entire world becomes clear to you? Shvetaketu says, no, my guru never taught me such things. And there isn't any such thing which you know that and you know the entire world, universe rather. Uddalaka says, sit down. I will teach you, I will tell you, and just listen to that. And now Uddalaka, through this story, tells him that you can see gold everywhere. In those days, even men used to wear gold ornaments. So you are also wearing some gold necklaces, earrings, or whatever. Now, if you know what is gold, right, you would know everything which is made of gold, right? Because you know that how it is made and all that. This is a bangle, but basically it is gold. You can see all these pots and pans made from clay, mrittika. If you know mrittika, then you will understand its different shapes and forms and names. Nama, Rupe. These are important words in Indian philosophy. So it is all Mrittika. Mrittika ityeva satyam. Mrittika is the truth. What you see as a water jug, or what you see as a plate, or what you see as a stove, all these are different rupas, that is forms, and different names. Because they look different, we give them different names. He also gives another example of ayasa, Krishnayasa. So yeah, we have seen how Ashwina also used it, Krishnayasa, and here also he says, Krishnayasa mityeva satyam. Once you know that, then you know everything which is made from that ayasa. But he gives one wonderful example in this ayasa thing. He says, even the nakha nikruntanam, nail cutter, whatever sort of nail cutters they had, he said even they are made from iron, from iron. So once you know that, you would know everything. Similarly, my son, this is very important. He said, similarly, my son, once you understand Brahman, which is the Antima Satya, you will understand the entire universe. You will understand your own Atman, mine Atman, his, her, everybody. You will understand that only when you understand Brahman. So just see from the story of giving and then giving examples from his daily routine, daily experience life, he tells him the philosophy of Antima Satya, ultimate reality. And which son do you think believes his father? Nobody does. So Shvetaketu says, I don't think that's true. How can you say that from Brahman, which is, Uddalaka describes what is Brahman, a sthula, a sukshma, neither microcosm nor macrocosm, this, that. He says, how can, which is nothing, create this entire universe? I don't believe you. Uddalaka Aruni says, okay, you don't believe me. I completely agree with you. You don't have to believe me till I prove it to you. And he tells him, I'm hungry. Can you go and get me a Udumbara phala? Udumbara, as you know, is Audumbara in Marathi, and they have fig-like anjir, anjir-like fruits. So he goes, Shvetaketu goes and brings a handful of Udumbaras for his father. He says, please open it, son. Shvetaketu opens it. Okay, what is inside these small beads like things? He said, oh, they are seeds. He said, oh, they are seeds. They are so small. Can you break one of them? With great effort, Shvetaketu breaks one of them. Inside, there is absolutely nothing. And then Uddalaka says to Shvetaketu, so son, you want to tell me that from this small seed which has nothing inside, this such a huge Udumbara tree was born? It grew from that small one seed which has nothing inside? If you say yes, then why don't you believe that from Brahman, which is Sat, Chit, Ananda, this entire universe can be created? Why don't you believe that? And then he believes it. Just see how the story kind of, impacts you more. And the last sentence in Uddalaka Aruni and Shvetaketu Samvad is something which I like the best or the most. Uddalaka says to his son, Shraddhasva Saumya. Hey Saumya, O child, Shraddhasva, have faith in me. Have faith in your Guru. Unless and until you have faith, Suppose you are reading your mathematics book. If you don't believe that, what is the use of reading it? If you don't believe the teacher who is teaching you in the class, and you think that, oh no, she is talking something which is not true, what is the point in sitting there and listening to her? If you want to have jnana, the first thing is you must have is shraddha. Shraddha for Guru. And as we know, these days, Shraddha for Guru is a rare commodity. Not many people have great gurus, and not many people have Shraddha also in what they are doing. Anyway, apart from all that, let us see how these stories develop and how they ultimately tell you the philosophy. There is another story. Matachi Hateshu Kurusha. There was a Kuru, you know, Kurukshetra and all. In that area, Matachi Hata. It was once bitten that by Matachi is drought. And there was no rain and no food. And then there was one person who and his wife, they would keep some mash, udid, away, kidney beans as they are called, away, and they would save for a rainy day, kind of. One day, he hears that the king is going to perform a yajna. So his wife says, I have saved some grain. You eat that because you need strength. And then she gives him that, only fistful of that, but he eats, goes there, and then of course he goes to the king. There is this yajna, and he asks all the priests, do you know the meaning of what you are doing? And nobody knows. And then this one tells them the meaning, and therefore the king becomes very happy, very pleased with him, and gives him a lot of money, and then he happily goes back home. So this story may not be very interesting, but what I like is the composer of Upanishads could have just simply said, there was this person who went to the king and he asked his priests, Rutvijas, whether you know what you are doing in that yajna, but nothing of the sort. He, his wife, everybody would come in. It would give you a family background. It would make you feel happy and think about all these people. And then gradually you will go to the philosophy of yajna. That is why Katha in Upanishads are important. And now I'm going to talk about a very important Upanishad. See, I'm just giving you cursory introduction, right? There is so much in Upanishads that you cannot even imagine. One Upanishad will take maybe a month or so, you know. So this Upanishad is called Bruhadaranyaka Upanishad. Bruhat, you know the meaning, the big. It is the biggest, not only by number of pages, but also by its impact and philosophy. Both by parimana and parinama, it is Bruhat, and that is why it is Bruhadaranyaka Upanishad. Belongs to Yajurveda, but like I told you, just doesn't matter, you know, which Veda it belongs to. The philosophy is universal, it is beyond time, and it is applicable to all of us. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad has two main characters. One is Janaka Vaideha, King Janaka Vaideha. You know him. He comes in Ramayana. He is Sita's father. The king Janaka of Videha country is Sita's father. Now just imagine how the Upanishads and Ramayana are kind of historically parallel, right? Ramayana doesn't have all this philosophy, but historically parallel. Forget about that. There is also a story of Ghorangi Rasa, one Rishi, teaching Devaki Putra Krishna about some Vidya. Now, when you say Devaki Putra Krishna, there are no two ways, and we know that they are talking about Krishna from Mahabharata. So, again, there are parallel references. These references, along with the stories, become very important to not decide, but to guess about the period, the time zone when Upanishads might have been composed. It's difficult to say anything with, what should I say? You cannot pinpoint the date. So in Sanskrit, we always talk about the period of Upanishad, the period of Mahabharata. We never say the time or date of Mahabharata. It's not possible. Okay? So this Janaka Vaideha is a great king. And just as he is a great king, he is also a great philosopher. In fact, in Mahabharata, Janaka Vaideha Sulabha Samvada. Sulabha is a Brahmavadini, she is a woman philosopher, and Janaka Vaideha and she, they discuss philosophy, and which is amazing. I mean, Janaka, okay, I can understand, but Sulabha, in spite of being a woman, she knew all this, which is important. We have to remember all the time that in Vedic times, women had every right to proper and formal education. Okay, so anyway, this Janaka Vaideha had his court, and in his court, many people would come, many people would come, and some were scholars, some were students, some were teachers, some were Gurukula owners, some were philosophers, mendicants. Once a person came. His name was Yajnavalkya. He is another figure who plays a very important role in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Now this Yajnavalkya comes, does his namaskar, whatever, to Janaka, and then asks him, Janaka asks him, please sit. Why have you come to me? Now see this. Why have you come to me? Do you want cows, that is material wealth, or athava anuvantan iti, anu antan, or you want to discuss about the ultimate thing which is even smaller than an atom, which is the ultimate reality. Yajnavalkya is a clever person. He says, Ubhayamapi. I want both. I want philosophical discussions with you, and I also want the money which I might get as a reward. And then they start talking to each other. You will be surprised. Janaka asks him question. In fact, first Yajnavalkya says, Acha, you tell me, O Janaka, you tell me, what do you know? What do you know about this Anuvanta? What do you know about Brahma? And then Janaka gives him a list of his teachers. Oh, Shailini Jitwa came and said, Chakshurvai Brahma iti. Then Yajnavalkya says, no, that's not enough. Do you know the Pratishtha and all about Chakshu? You don't. So don't say that. Then he says, okay, Gardhava Vipito Bharadwaja came and said something else, Granam Vai Brahma iti. Again, Yajnavalkya refutes that statement. Janaka gives 6 or 7 teachers quotations and tries to tell Yajnavalkya what is Brahman. And then Yajnavalkya says something nice. See, this is where the story element matters. Yajnavalkya says, Oh Janaka, okay, suppose you want to go somewhere. If you are going by water, jala, you will take a nauka, right? If you want to go by road, you will take a ratha. Similarly, what you have told me up till now are various ways to which might take you to the ultimate knowledge. But do you know where you want to go? Do you know the destination? Do you know what you want to achieve? You don't know that. You're just thinking about various ways and you are getting attracted by the paths. Don't do that. Look at the end point. Focus on your aim. And this is true not only for Janaka but even for us. How much importance should we give to various ways? What we should do is focus on the ultimate reality, ultimate knowledge, ultimate love, whatever you want in your life, focus on that. Okay, so this is what Janaka is told. Then Janaka realizes that here is somebody who is way superior to my previous teachers. And then he says, let us exchange the roles. Anumam Shadi. Now you teach me. And then Yajnavalkya accepts and then he starts teaching Janaka. At that point, Janaka says, okay, I will give you 1,000 cows even before they start talking. I will give you 1,000 cows with gold rings attached to their horns. And you know what Yajnavalkya says? This is where a real jnani person shows his mettle. He says, no, my father has told me, he has taught me that you should not accept money from the students till they are satisfied. Who will tell such things to modern day teachers? Who, even before you join the class, take fees, I have told, in not only in thousands anymore, in lakhs, and you don't even know what you're going to get. So just imagine the difference of mental frame of those people and us. Anyway, then Yajnavalkya starts telling him other philosophy, and Janaka is convinced, and Janaka appoints Yajnavalkya as his court philosopher. So Yajnavalkya would now always stay in the court of Janaka. Now you must have realized how the story has taken you from Yajnavalkya coming from somewhere and then settling in Janaka's uh, darbar or court, sabha. One day, Janaka also performs Bahudakshina Yajna. Bahudakshina means a yajna in which a lot of dakshina was given and for which many priests and philosophers and scholars and shastris, everybody had come. So when he looked at that august gathering, Janaka said, oh my God, who must be the greatest of these people? They all are very good in their own field, but who must be the greatest one? So he asked, he says, there are 1,000 cows standing outside. Whosoever is the greatest philosopher, the word he uses is Brahmishta. He can take away all those cows. Everybody is scared, Nobody would say, oh, I am number one. Nobody has that courage or kind of arrogance to say this, that I am the greatest. But Yajnavalkya says to his teacher, hey Somashrava, come and take those 1,000 cows to our Gurukula. Then the Hota, the priest of Janaka, gets up and says, but why? Even we want the share, even we are great. And then Yajnavalkya starts arguing or debating with each one of them. There are so many questions asked, I won't go into the details, but Artabhaga, Shakalya, Shailini, and many other, Kampya, they all come and ask Yajnavalkya questions. Yajnavalkya answers them. But about Shakalya, I want to tell you one thing. First of all, Shakalya says, Kati Devaha iti. How many gods and goddesses are there? Now, this is a question which later on in Hinduism has been interpreted wrongly. We all say Trayas Trimshat Koti, right? 33 koti devata. We know this. And people who don't understand us, who don't understand our religion, our philosophy, they keep saying that, oh, what a religion. Whom will you call? There are 33 crores of devatas. It is not so. Koti is not a mathematical term here. It doesn't mean crore. It means state, gunavatta. Just as we say, parakotiचा राग or उच्च shikshan. When we use such words, we don't mean, that crores. What we mean is of a higher level, right? And he says there are 33 such devatas. Before Yajnavalkya, before Brihadaranyaka, Atharva Veda also talks about 33 devatas. Shatapatha Brahmana also talks about 33 devatas. In fact, two Buddhist Sanskrit texts also talk about 33 devatas. And which are they? Dvadasha Adityaha. When you do Surya Namaskara, you say all the 12 names. So you know Dvadasha Aditya. Dvadasha is 12. Ashta Vasu. We know Ashta Vasu. Bhishma was one of the Vasus and there were 8 children. So Ashta Vasu. So 12 plus 8, 20. And Ekadasha Rudra, 31. But we are talking about 33. And Yajnavalkya says the last two remaining are Indra and Prajapati. These 31 devatas are fixed. The last two, some say Ahoratra, that is day and night. Some say Ashwinau, the twin stars and all that. But what is important is we never talked about 33 crores of devata. We have to tell this to people around us, and if they have any misgivings, any misunderstanding about our religion, it is our duty to see to it that we clarify that, right? This Shakalam also has another incident with Yajnavalkya in the same type of discussion. I mean, everybody asked a question one day. Shakala asked him, Yajnavalkya, he asked him some questions like, where does Purusha live? Purusha in the sense Atman. And then they have this discussion. And then Yajnavalkya says, you have been asking me too many questions. Let me ask you one question. And if you don't know the answer, your head will break. Remember Vikram or Vetal? Huh? So we have this kind of some idea, that if you don't answer the question properly, your head will break. So first when I read this, I thought, okay, it's only metaphorical. But Yajnavalkya asks him about Upanishadika Purusha, and Shakala is not able to answer that, and his head actually breaks and falls down on the ground. And his Shishas, this is what Brihadaranyaka tells you. The Shishas, they all collect it together and carry it away. I don't know what exactly they want to say by this. It is not likely that Yajnavalkya will do such thing or the head will really break. But before Shakala comes another person and about whom I want to talk a lot. Her name is Gargi. Gargi Vachaknavi. Vachaknu is a great orator and Vachaknavi is a female great orator. Okay? So this Gargi is also sitting in that sabha where all these people are asking questions or Yajnavalkya is asking them. So Gargi also asks him question. So first she says, Hey Yajnavalkya, Yat idam sarvam, that is this earth, sarvam tat apsu otam cha protam cha. All this is contained, that is covered by water. We know that on earth, one fifth is land and everything else is water. Kasminnu khalu tat apaha otashcha protashcha. And in what is that water contained? So, what covers the water? Very pertinent questions. And just see, she is not only talking about physical or sciences, but she will take you to metaphysics. Yajnavalkya says, Apaha. Oh, that is contained in Vayu. And we know Hava. And what is Vayu contained in? Remember these words, Otam cha Protam cha. Ota and Prota is the straight and straight thread, and the wide thread, or that one is in width. When you weave a cloth on a loom, on a hand loom, that is called ota and prota. But even today we use the word ota prota in, suppose this cup is filled to the brim, I would say ota prota bharla hai. Right? So similar, these words are important because, as I always say, right from Upanishads you are using them. Well, just imagine how our culture seeps through. Anyway, then she keeps asking him, and what is that opponent? Then he says Aditya Loka, Chandra Loka, Gandharva Loka, Indra Loka, Prajapati Loka, and ultimately Brahma Loka. And she says, and in what is Brahma Loka contained? He says, Gargi ma atiprakshihi. Don't ask too many questions. This is something which you will not be able to take. And if I give you the answer, your brain will not be able to sustain it, and may not your head fall down. So please stop. And he stops Gargi from asking further questions. Okay? Gargi accepts that, goes away. But after 2 days, this lady comes back. And I always have great respect for this woman. Just imagine, she's the only woman in that entire court. She was not allowed to ask questions, but she has come back. And when she comes back, what kind of confidence and what kind of courage she must have had. She comes and says, "O Bhagavantaha," she is requesting all the other philosophers and the king. The sentence is so beautiful in Upanishad. Yatha vai Kashyo va Vaideho va Ugraputraha. Just as a brave soldier from Kashi or Videha comes to the battlefield with only 2 arrows in his quiver, similarly, I have also come here with only 2 questions, Yajnavalkya. Sapatnati Vyadinau. And these 2 arrows will definitely kill the enemy. Similarly, Yajnavalkya, I will definitely hit my target when I ask this question. Please allow me. And it is only after she gets the anumati that she asks the question. And her questions are amazing. She says, first she talks about space and then about time. She says, all this which is below earth, above sky, in between earth and sky, in what is it contained? The space, in what it is contained. And also, all this, that then she starts with Nimisha. Nimisha is the time you take to just flick your eyelash. So Nimisha, Muhurta, Kshana, Ardhamasa, Masa, Samvatsara, all this entire time, in what is time contained. So just imagine the idea which the science has picked up, Western science has picked up now for last maybe 400 years or so, of space and time. Gargi has propounded that long back. Many other philosophers too have done that, but Gargi does that. And therefore, Yajnavalkya is very happy. And he says, yes, I will tell you. It is Akasha. Now, Akasha doesn't mean sky, the one which you see on your head. It is not sky, it is that void, infinite void in which it is contained. I mean, nowadays we see so many programs on National Geographic Channel and this, and what so many galaxies and Akashaganga and whatnot. So he says it is contained in Akasha. And then she has the courage and conviction to ask him, Kasmindu khalu akasham cha potam cha protam cha. And in what is Akasha contained? And here Yajnavalkya does tell her the answer. He says, Aksharam. He describes Brahman as Akshara, that which never becomes less, that which never changes. He gives many adjectives like asthulam, asukshvam, arasvam, adirgham, ananu, this, that, and he says, etasya va aksharasya prashasane gargi. It is under the control of this akshara, this Brahman, Surya Chandramasau Vidrutau Tishthatah. Surya and Chandra, the sun and the moon, they stay away from each other, they don't collide. It is because of this that there is sun and there is moon, there are mountains and rivers, and it is because of this akshara. So he talks about space and then also tells her how time is also created by this akshara. Can you believe that? I mean, nowadays uh, it's a fashion to say that space-time singularity is there. I mean, Stephen Hawking said that first, and people study that. I'm no physicist, but I have read a little, and then I always feel that, of course, hats off to these scientists. But what about my Gargi? What about my heritage? What about my history? Who will bring that to the forefront? And therefore, anyway, then when he completes the discussion, the last sentence which Yajnavalkya says is very important. He says, Yovai, the one who understands this akshara and dies, is called a Brahmana. And the one who does not understand the akshara and dies is called Krupana. And then Gargi says to the entire Sabha, please say that he is the greatest and you are fortunate to listen to this philosophy. So just see. The philosophy of Atman, Brahman, everything is taught through a story. And story where there are similes of soldiers and this and that. And therefore you remember each and every word, every letter actually. And one last story again from Bruhadaranyaka and again about Yajnavalkya. I'll quickly wind up my talk now. Yajnavalkya had a wife, two wives actually, Katyayani and Maitreyi. When he decided to leave away this samsara and go to Vanaprastha, he called both of them and said, see, I want to go away. Before I go, I will divide whatever estate we have between the two of you. Katyayani says, okay. Maitreyi says, now see how I call her again a female philosopher. Maitreyi says, suppose you give me wealth which will fill all the earth around me. Will I have Atma Jnana by that? And Yajnavalkya says something beautiful. He says, no, knowledge cannot be bought by money. What you can have by money is yathavai upakaranavattam jivitam syam. You will just have a comfortable life, a pleasurable life, which you can buy instruments, upakarana, of pleasure, not of atmajnana. Then she said, "No, I don't want that money. Tell me something which will give me Atmajnana." And then Yajnavalkya tells her Atmajnana. These are famous dialogues. And the first sentence he says is, Nava are patyuh kamaya patih priyo bhavati, Atmanastu kamaya patih priyo bhavati. You don't like your husband because he is your husband, but you like him because of his Atman. And then he gives her various other examples, Patni, Putra, this, that. And ultimately he says, Atma va are, listen to this carefully, Atma va are drashtavyaha, shrotavyaha, mantavyaha, nididhyasitavyaha. Atmani va drushte shrute mate nididhyasite sarvamidam vijnatam bhavati. You must first uh, want to know about Atman. Okay? Then Shrotavyaha, you must get knowledge about it. Mantavyaha, you must think about it. Only reading books will not help you. You have to think about it. Mantavyaha. And the ultimate step is Nididhyasitavyaha. You have to take dhyasa. Whatever you are doing, that remains in your brain, that remains in your mind all the time. Atmaniva drushte. Once you know Atman, sarvam idam vijnatam bhavati. Everything becomes known to you. So you just have to know Atman. Remember what Uddalaka taught Shvetaketu? Similar examples. Then she doesn't quite understand, because she is not formally trained. And she said, but how you say Atman is everywhere? I don't see. He said, doesn't matter. And he says, bring me a water pot. She brings him some water in a clay pot. Then he says, bring me Saindhava Khilyaha, a salt, some salt. Saindhava, coming from Sindhu. So they knew how to make salt pans and extract salt from the sea. So Saindhava Khilya. Then he said, stir it, I would like to drink it. But before that, you taste it. From this corner, how is it? Salty. From that, salty. From top, salty. From bottom, salty. Okay, so everywhere it is salty. Now show me the salt. She said, no, I can't show you the salt. It is everywhere. I can't pinpoint the salt. He said, precisely. That is what happens to Atman also. It is everywhere. She asked the same question which Shvetaketu asked his father. But how can, from such a small principle, this entire universe be created? He says, remember one day when I came back home, you by mistake had put Ardra Indhanam, wet fuel, some wet uh, tree leaves or something in your gas stove in the kitchen, and the whole ashrama was full of smoke. There was only one small wet stick, and the entire ashram was full of smoke. This stick had no life. This stick had no power. Whereas my Brahman had so much power. My Brahman is Sat, Chit, Ananda. Why can't you understand that it can create so much? He gives many other examples. He gives examples of musical instruments because Maitreyi must be playing musical instruments. And he ultimately convinces her how Atman and Brahman are same. There is no dichotomy, there is no Dvaita in Atman and Brahman, and this is the famous philosophy of Vedanta school, which is called Advaita, and taught to you through stories, taught to you through conversation, taught to you through dialogues and simple style. Probably one of the reasons why Upanishads have survived even now is the style, the stories, the dialogues, and of course, the great philosophy which Upanishads propound. Thank you.